Diane Abbott was in the Commons to hear both main party leaders condemn Frank Hester's words, as reported by The Guardian.
Is the Prime Minister proud to be bankrolled by someone using racist and misogynist language when he says the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington makes you want to hate all black women?
Mr Speaker, the alleged comments were wrong, they were racist, and he has now, as I said, the comments were wrong, they were racist. He has rightly apologised for them, and that remorse should be accepted, Mr Speaker.
The man bankrolling the Prime Minister also said that the member for Hackney North should be shot. How low would he have to sink? What racist, woman-hating threat of violence would he have to make before the Prime Minister plucked up the courage to hand back the £10 million that he's taken from him?
Prime Minister! Mr Speaker, I'm absolutely not going to take any lectures from somebody who chose to represent an anti-Semitic terrorist group, Hizb ut-Tahrir, who chose to serve a leader who let anti-Semitism run rife in this Labour Party.
Diane Abbott repeatedly rose to speak, but the Speaker didn't call her. She later tweeted, "I don't know whose interests the Speaker thinks he is serving, but it's not the interests of the Commons or democracy." Inside number 10, while the Prime Minister was speaking, the Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, was signing a trade deal with Texas.
That it's our pleasure to welcome you to 10 Downing Street.
She condemned Frank Hester's language as racist yesterday, hours before the Prime Minister stopped holding out against doing just that. For some Tory MPs, it's yet another unforced error from a Prime Minister they want gone. Talk swirls that Rishi Sunak, to head off these rebels, might just call a general election for May.
A few people in the Conservative Party, Parliamentary Party, are trying to make the Prime Minister's life as difficult as possible.
They're trying to bring him down.
I mean, if it gets too serious, I suspect the Prime Minister will call a general election for May 2nd. Why would you want to have a general election in 6 weeks' time? Don't understand that. But he may feel he's got no other option, that the Conservative Party is unleadable, and that for the sake of the nation, it's better to go early than allow this psychodrama to continue.
Keeping up the pressure on the leadership on a bad day, the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, tweeted on the latest plan to give thousands of pounds to encourage failed asylum seekers to leave for Rwanda. Mr Jenrick wrote, "Even on its own terms, the proposal is ludicrous. It speaks to astonishing naivety about what we face." It's not likely to calm down the rebel MPs, who some feel are out of control.
I think it's incumbent on some of my colleagues, the minority, just to shut up. Just please shut up. You haven't got the answers. You've never had the answers. You've created trouble for the last 3 years for whoever's been in number 10. I just despair, really.
Frank Hester's donations include paying for this prime ministerial trip to Yorkshire last year. Rishi Sunak refused to rule out taking more money from the donor. At the end of Prime Minister's questions, Keir Starmer went to speak to Diane Abbott, who remains suspended from the Parliamentary Party. She later published an article in The Independent saying he'd been too focused on demanding the donations be paid back and not fast enough to call out the racist remarks.
Well, Sir Craig Oliver was the Downing Street Director of Communications when David Cameron was Prime Minister. And I spoke to him a little earlier and asked him whether Rishi Sunak should hand the money back.
I think the interesting question for the Conservative Party is not should it hand the money back, but can it hand the money back? The reality is that political parties operate on very, very fine margins. And if a massive donation of this magnitude came in, it would have been spent very, very quickly, or certainly earmarked very, very quickly.
But then Rishi Sunak could dig into his own pockets and hand that money back right now if he needed to.
I don't think Rishi Sunak is going to start the precedent of, taking his own money and spending it there. You could say that too, but I don't think he's ever going to do that. Perhaps a degree of honesty on that might go down a bit better.
Right, but then the conclusion is that Rishi Sunak is happy to keep the company, or at least the money, of a man he says made racist comments. I mean, that's the most disgraceful sort of political expediency, isn't it?
Well, look, the issue here, I think, for Rishi Sunak is, did he operate quickly enough. The reality is we live in a world that is massively speeded up, and the expectation is that when an issue happens, the media, quite rightly, holds Number 10 accountable and says, look, what are you going to do about it? It seems to me that a red flag should have gone up very, very early in Number 10. There's no debate about this issue. These were appallingly racist comments, misogynistic too, arguably, and to get into a situation where there wasn't a clear, definitive line, obviously this is racist, obviously it's unacceptable, we are not going to hand the money back and draw a line, that would have saved an awful lot of pain, I think, for the Prime Minister and for a number of cabinet ministers and ministers who had to go out on the airways and try and defend the indefensible.
Yeah, Hester's company, by the way, says his criticism had nothing to do with her gender or colour of skin. But, I mean, Number 10 did take quite a while to decide that these comments were racist. And as you say, ministers were then sent out to describe these comments as merely inappropriate. Is that, knowing what you do about communications, you used to run the Number 10 communications, is that a communications failure or a failure of leadership?
It's a bit of both. I think that the reality is that you've got to understand when you're in Number 10 what is a real red flag issue. And look, yes, of course, somebody's going to say, look, is this racist? Is this misogynistic? Have a debate about it. The reality is any reasonable person in politics looking at it go, straightforwardly racist, that is a serious problem. We cannot be seen to be supporting that. And there needs to be a clear line that we're not dragged to. And that's...
Is that Rishi Sunak's fault that that isn't happening? Because this isn't the first time,
Well, ultimately, I do think that the Prime Minister does need to have a system in Number 10 that when his Director of Communications or her Director of Communications says there is a serious problem, we need to decide the line, and we need to decide the line now. And when you decide that line, you need to have the capacity to be able to say, where is this story actually going to end up? Not can we prevaricate and hope it goes away, knowing that a story like this is not going to go away and knowing that people are going to make a lot of political capital out of it. So you actually have to draw a line in the right place immediately and quickly. And it hasn't happened, as you rightly say, a few times. And if I were Rishi Sunak, I would be asking questions about, am I actually dealing with these situations quickly enough, particularly in an election year?
Ultimately, this row is about Diane Abbott and someone called a Tory donor calling for her to be shot, said she should be shot. Should she, therefore, have been allowed to have her say in the Commons today?
Well, look, I am not an expert on Commons procedure. I've seen more than enough debate. If I were the Speaker in the House of Commons, I'd have called her. Personally, if I'd been in charge and had been advising, I would have said, I think you should probably hear from the victim here.
So, Craig Oliver, thanks very much.